New day, new explanation, guten Morgen. This build will make dealing with major enemies and above easier, while also providing solution for the hordes of minor enemies. So it effectively smooths out the difficulty level, which could be a good deal. I basically wanted to create a Hypnosis build. This will be our main weapon and we will select the rest of our gear to support it. This is not an easy one, it takes everyone some time to get a feel for it. The best damage output with it is achieved by continuously maintaining the buff provided by the third Mysterium. When active, our damage converts to lightning, which is great for two reasons. First, enemy armor doesn't protect against it. And second, on hit, a lightning bolt jumps out, dealing 50% of the base damage to another enemy. Then from there it jumps again, dealing 25% of the base damage to a third one. To be clear, it's not actually a bolt, it just looks like one. The percentage of the damage is fixed, neither the Thunderbolt nor the Bead has any effect on it. We can keep this buff active by not missing our shots and by not reloading the weapon. There are ways to handle the reloading. I'm thinking of the various reloaded related arcanas, and I wanted to reduce the chance of missing by having us shoot at stationary targets. This is why freezing ended up playing a dominant role in this build. Beside this, I added the Rotweaver as a secondary weapon. It's a fast way to trigger a soul sigil, which again results in a stationary target. You might even get a touch of that arcana with it, which is a very powerful combo. Freezing and stunning are also useful for more than just providing a stationary target. They also act as multipliers. When an enemy is frozen, we will deal 50% more damage, and when stunned, we will deal 100% more. Alright, let's go through everything one by one again, and I will share some tips and tricks. Hypnosis. As I mentioned before, we should try to minimize missing, but if it happens, don't panic. The weapon's base damage will still be just as strong, except enemy armor will reduce it, which of course doesn't matter if you're shooting an unarmored enemy, and we lose the jumping lightning effect. Don't spray and pray in panic, because it's not meant for that. If you don't charge the individual shots, its damage is indeed low. I'd only go for headshots consistently on frozen enemies. In all other cases, focus more on timing. When it's quiet, the sounds of the weapon can help you find the perfect time, but if a few creepers are screaming non-stop next to you, it's better to watch for the light source on the back of the weapon, which flashes brightly when you need to shoot. After a short while, it will burn into your muscle memory, and that's when another important thing comes into play. You need to separate when you're shooting using muscle memory and when a shot requires additional focus. What especially happens is that after a weapon swap or using a spell, you will often press the aim button before the weapon is fully ready. It's a very short time, maybe half a second, but it's just enough to make you release the shot too early based on muscle memory. Don't stress about it, you will feel it when you make this mistake and you will learn to be more careful. Rotweaver! A really quick little trigger for soul sigils. Its damage is also very good, you can melt enemies with it. The fact its magazine applies decay damage is huge. I will go into more detail about its other uses when we look at the prophecies. Vulture, as always. If there's panic, I reach for this, but there won't be. I basically always make sure the rest of the build can handle everything. This is just here as a bonus. Ice Stiletto. Oh boy, this is a sweet little magic. You can throw it infinitely until you hit a target, but when you do hit, how you hit matters. A normal hit applies a general freeze, which is already quite long on its own. On a crit, however, it adds a time freeze, which doubles the freezing duration. To give you an idea of how long this is, with full duration and the duration bead, the sepulcher stays frozen for over 22 seconds. Beside this, the stiletto can also block projectiles, and this doesn't count as a hit, so it doesn't trigger the cooldown. One more very important thing, you will probably encounter the same bug that I ran into on every run. I couldn't pinpoint the exact cause, but I suspect it's a combination of rapid weapon swaps, spell usage, charge shots, and not cocking the weapon. It introduces a very harsh delay on the light spell, more than a second. If you press it again during this time, thinking what the fuck, it will fire the heavy spell as if you had held the button down the whole time. There is a very simple fix for it. The bug doesn't occur if you have the Rotweaver in your hands when you use the light spell. It only affects the hypnosis in this negative way, but this is actually a good thing, because if we get into the habit of switching weapons before using the spell, we will never forget to use the swap reload. Miasma, my personal favorite heavy spell. It deals decay damage over a large area, which continuously increases the longer someone stays inside the damaging zone. You can gong it multiple times, just like the curse spell. When you do this, it spills acid in a smaller area, dealing even more decay damage. We can even extend its already decent lifetime by shooting it, and when it does finally reach its end, it says goodbye with one last explosion. Braid of Seductress, a strong relic. It gives us 30% melee damage reduction, and if an enemy hits us, they become frozen. If we kill them while they are in this state, we get half of the damage we took back as HP. Regarding spells, there is usually some cooldown on freezing, meaning if something has just thawed out, it can't be frozen again for a while. That doesn't apply here. We are skipping ahead a bit because the ring is closely tied to this. Ring of Thorns. If we can successfully dodge an enemy's melee attacks, they will also freeze, and we also get a bonus if we manage to kill them before they thaw out. An ammo replenish orb. It's similar to the Juice yellow orb, but this one is blue. It can give a decent amount of ammo, but that really shouldn't be a problem for us anyway. But that's not all it gives. It fully refills your stamina and your light spell. It's best not to run for it immediately, but to use it when you actually need it. There is also no cooldown on the freezing here. Every time you successfully dodge their attacks, they will freeze. Jew! We get a good chance that after a kill, a yellow orb is left behind. Picking it up gives us ailment cleanse. Furthermore, for 12 seconds we get a temporary shield, 35% reload speed and a movement speed boost. Absolutely best in slow. The moment the orb is picked up, nearby enemies also get a knockback. Beads! Don't panic! Free Arcana. This is a solid base in all of my builds. If I'm not spending feathers to reveal hidden arcanas, I can spend more and accumulate more. Blast Hit Bead. Since we won't be focusing on headshots, except on frozen enemies, this is a good choice. Blast Aim converts normal hits into crits, and this bead adds an extra 50% damage on top of that. Elemental Duration Bead, to make the freezing last even longer. Lightning Spell Charge Bead. This is so we don't have to think about whether the spell has recharged or not. Ailment Power Bead. It has no effect on the Hypnosis Mysterium tree or on the freezing multiplier, but I still couldn't leave it out because it will add a lot to our decay damage, especially if we get Necrosis and the Decay Echo. Here are the stat requirements to get the build running. You need 40 on Mind, 40 on Fate, 20 on Arsenal, 20 on Blood, and 35 on Witchery. This will land you around level 110, maybe slightly less based on your starting class. The build can be intensified by maxing out Fate and Witchery for 50% elemental duration and 35% blast aim chance, but that adds another 125 levels. If that feels a lot, you can scale it back. To simplify, first drop the blast hit bead. If it's still too demanding, your next cut should be the free arcana. Prophecies. Nimble Finger in the first position as the omen demands. You can choose only one. It's possible to get more, but it's tricky and you always have to risk losing the first one. We are primarily hunting for the reload swap here, so the Hypnosis doesn't lose its Mysterium tree during the boss fight due to reloading. Our second target is Skill Reload, which is more than enough for the map itself, but for the boss you will need to pick up something else as well. We will also have chance for Dash and Slide Reload later on. Water! First, a few words about the Omen. You can reroll Arcanas one by one for a White Raven Feather. You can even reroll ones you have already chosen, so you can adjust the build later on. Usually even in the first round it offers at least one that's useful and doesn't need to be replaced later. Pagophobia is non-negotiable. On top of the basic 50% damage boost on frozen enemies, we get an extra 20%. Snowball is also a great choice. With it, a single freeze can be enough to freeze and kill an entire group one by one if they are in a tight area. But the build also allows us to start this freezing minigame in 2 or even more places at once. Ice Statue can make this even more reliable. Nothing will rush us. It could also be good for securing the passive effect of the ring and the relic, since we have to kill them before they thaw out. Although they thaw on the first bullet hit, this isn't a problem because we will mostly be using that bullet to kill them anyway. If you don't have Ice Statue, you can play around with a Freezing Gust. Our spell isn't really suitable for this because enemies stay frozen for too long, but the 2 passive I mentioned earlier are good for triggering it. Ice Remnant is an option if needed, but 35 on Witchery should be enough. Cryovolcano is only an option if the Rotweaver has a bigger role to play. I will explain when that might happen in the Earth element section next. The others here in water don't make much sense for us, so let's move on. Earth. The Omen requires 5 Raven Feathers to level up your Arcanas a bit. We always have to consider if we have chosen once where this is possible or not. If we have any extra feathers beyond that, they can all go into water rerolls. One of my favorite combos here is Touch of Death and Rotweaver. We apply decay with a shot, which immediately stuns minor enemies, and if we keep shooting we deal double damage, making everything disappear particularly in a second. In this case we have to skip freezing because the 2 statuses can't coexist. We only freeze major enemies. We can switch back to the Hypnosis for them and only use it for the small ones if the range doesn't allow for the Rotweaver. Necrosis and Decay Echo shape the build a bit differently, especially if you get them both at the same time. Our dot damage becomes insane, making it worthwhile to use the Miasma off cooldown. Even with this, you can and should still freeze enemies because the decay damage also gets the 50% boost against frozen foes. Atrophy is one of the best defensive arcana here. If you're in trouble, just drop Miasma on yourself and suddenly 60% of the incoming damage is gone. The Fertilizer's pull also works well, stand in it if you can. Infectious Cloud has a big flashy explosion, but the dot it applies is weak, so we don't need it. That's all for here. Do not choose any of the others with this build under any circumstances. Spells. Lasting Elements and Elemental Refresh will both increase the duration. The latter only works once when you apply a new element. Refreshing it doesn't count. There are also various recharge arcanas here which can be good, but they need to be tailored to the build. So obviously don't take out the Fast Light spell if you are using Miasma off cooldown. I have also thought a lot about Cascade and changed my mind about it many times, so I won't give a final verdict here. It can be good either way, everyone should weight it for themselves. Your fate level is the deciding factor here as well as when and where you aim. Firearms. It's in the 5th row, so we can choose more of them. If we are thinking about damage, the priority is Elemental Firepower, full of magic, then Cleansing Fire. Stun Bullets is a good arcana, but we won't get much use out of it in this particular build. Reload Dash is only an option if you got Key Reload earlier. Bull. We are hunting for health sacrifice and range sacrifice here, for the sake of increasing our base damage. Slide Reload is an option if the RNG hasn't given you enough reload solutions yet. Last one is the Lightness. This is for the spare recharge or the extra spell charge. And the Fall of Magic is also good if you get it from this bull. And we are done. I've brought 2 runs again, if you are curious to see what all of this looks like in action. If you like it and want an explanation for the next build as well, you need to smash that like button hard. See you next time.